This is Understanding Tree and Root Protection During Construction. I'm Vincent Ferre. I'm the Urban Forest Manager for Arlington County. And I'll be talking about where tree roots are located a little bit. This is a little bit of a refresher from a previous presentation by Melissa Gaudet, one of our urban foresters, and then go more in depth about how we do on development projects and how to not do it and how to do it to properly protect trees. This presentation has kind of been cobbled together from different presentations by Mike Knapp who now works for Montgomery County, Maryland, Melissa Gilday, one of our foresters, Keith Pitchford, who's a private forester who's done a lot of presentations on tree preservation, and some pictures by Nora Palmatier, who's also on this call. So I'll do a little refresher on where roots exist. So we have different types of roots. We have woody roots that are large lateral roots, like these flared roots outside of the tree and also going farther away from the tree. These provide the real the compression support that holds back the tree from falling over and provides anchorage. 1 second. Shoot. It's hard to manage this at the same time as letting people in. There we go. Share again. There we go. Okay, so these woody roots provide anchorage. They provide carbohydrate storage. That's where the food is for these trees. And then they also provide for water, mineral, and organic compound transport to the tree to keep it alive. Then we have taproots, sinkers, and strikers. Those also provide carbohydrate storage. Most of the woody roots do. They also store water and also provide anchorage in a different way. I'll show that in a minute. Then we have non-woody roots. So these are the small roots in the upper layer of the soil. This is the top 6 inches usually in our area, but they also are attached to the ends of woody roots throughout the system. These really help with carbohydrate synthesis, using those sugars, giving those to the surrounding fungal network, and storing those carbohydrates as well. They help with absorption of water, mineral or organic compound transport, and they tend to have a lot of surface area with all these root hairs. You can see an example on the right. This is just a tiny pine tree with tons of fine roots. This is mostly non-woody roots when they're young, but the trees will have non-woody roots throughout their life. They're just spread out a lot more over time. So here you can see an example of root architecture of an open grown tree. So you can see that these woody roots are the bigger roots laying around here, and then you have some of these sinkers that go down. In our area, most of these roots are typically no deeper than 4 feet. There are some exceptions to that, but most of the time it's not deeper than 4 feet. And then you have a lot of the non-woody roots in the top layer that provide those that carbohydrate synthesis and the nutrient transport. This is one way of looking at it, and it's diagrammatic. It's not to scale. You have the structural roots close to the tree. If you ever see a tree fall over, you can see that it's kind of taken that structural plate with it. Really, that really supports its structure. That can sometimes go farther out for different types of trees. So we actually have a wider definition of structural root here that you'll see in a little bit, but it's usually the roots closer to the tree that provide that structural support. And you have the absorption roots, which have usually more of those non-woody roots in them, but tend to go out to places to get more water or nutrients and other things. And those are also critical for providing the tree with water and energy. Roots obviously kinds of different places, and these are some great examples from all kinds of folks. Like sometimes roots are cut off by compaction, like you can see in the top left. Some trees grow in very weird places on top of rocks or on top of banks, and they can be either restricted or permitted to expand their roots in different ways. In an urban setting, you can see this kind of root system a lot, where there's a restricted base, often by sidewalks and pavement or roads that are restricted. Even this fence pole on the right probably quite a bit. So that really changes our view of where roots are in certain places. And as much as it's nice to have roots go in a nice circle, that's not always the case. So we're gonna start talking about where are the structural roots and where are the critical roots. So in Arlington County, we've defined this in this way, and this is unfortunately inconsistent across the country. And I don't necessarily want to say that this is the perfect way, but this is what we found supports our type of development best, because it's more realistic with what we're working with in our environment. So we have the tree in the middle, and we have the structural roots, which are this circle in the middle. And we have the critical root zone, which is the circle on the outside. So the circle on the outside, you have to think about everything inside of that is at least the critical root zone, and then some of what's inside of the critical root zone is the structural root zone. So the structural root zone is 1 foot per 1 inch diameter. Or sorry, half a foot. Sorry, let me go back. 6 inches or half a foot per 1 inch diameter away from the trunk. So if it's a 30-inch tree, that's 15 feet away from the trunk. And the critical root zone is 30 feet or 1 foot per 1 inch of diameter. You can see that 1 dBH or diameter at breast height is 1 foot critical root zone radius here. And you can see the structural root zone is 6 times the diameter or 6 inches per foot or per inch. So this is a good way to diagram a tree kind of in isolation without thinking about what's going around it. So what we did with that then, and we tried to understand what the impact is to those roots. So we have this broken down in different categories. So we have medium-sized mature trees, large-sized mature trees, and then other trees on the bottom here. So for medium-sized mature trees, these are trees 12 to 24 inches. You can only have a 20% impact to the critical root zone or no impact to the structural root zone. So what that means is, let's see if I can find a different way of doing a pointer. Yeah, here we go. Hopefully this is visible. So all right. Sorry, I lost that there for a second. Bringing it back. So let's go back to that. Let's share again. Okay. Hopefully this is coming through again. Okay, let's try this again. Pointer, laser pointer. Okay. So, so if we have a medium mature tree, so that's 12 to 24 inches, you could cut a slice of maybe 20 inches, or sorry, 20% off of that zone and not impact that inside circle, and still be able to count it for tree canopy on development. Now, what's critical to understand here is that just because you're able to count it doesn't mean the tree will definitely survive. It's still impact. 20% is a lot of impact to trees system. But this is what we've allowed in our code to be impacted. So if you have an even larger tree, so 24 inches or greater, so that's this example actually, you can only slice off maybe 10%. And then if you have any other tree, so that's below 12 inches, that can be 30%. So that could be 30%. So that's usually a big slice of the outside critical root zone, but still no impact to that inside area. Okay. So then people are also allowed to show alternative root zone locations. And this is the the technical language for it, and I can share this with folks. It's in the Chesapeake Bay Ordnance Guidance Manual. You can minimize impact through alternative root protection and construction methods like root padding or other root protection. You can bond a tree and provide aftercare like mulching and watering, or you could provide alternative drafts of where the critical root zone may be. So I'll show what that means a little bit. So we rarely have trees that look like context. There's almost always like a building or something else nearby. And so we have to think about root zones in a little bit more complicated way. This is a program called Tree Matrix. This was developed by Keith Pitchford. And then puts a just a regular circle on it, and then calculates how much that area would be. But then it adds barriers, like there's a building over here, for example. There's another building over here, and there's pavement over here. And then it squeezes that root zone. You see the green root zone squeezed in between these buildings. And that actually completely changes the calculation of impact. So if they're impacting this tree by building this building, in this example on the left, it only shows us 15% root loss. But on the right, it shows us 38% root loss. And that might be much less tolerable for this beech, which is already a low tolerance tree in the first place. So in this case, this is actually a negative impact. But they could also show using something like this that a tree can actually survive because there's restrictions in place that show that the roots are elsewhere. All right, so another way of looking at it is you could diagram it in different ways. This is an image that was prepared by Mike Knapp, who works for Montgomery County. And it looks at a street tree because he reviews mostly street tree impacts there. And it sees this is a much more like diagram, not less diagrammatic, a more kind of pretty way of looking at it. And you can see where these roots are, maybe underneath the driveway, which might be an asphalt driveway. Probably not under the road, probably not under the driveway apron, and probably not under the building. So we have a 26-inch diameter American sycamore and a 22-inch diameter American sycamore. So if you just draw a circle on that, that's much less realistic in this place. We really have to think about this because if there's no disturbance, or sorry, the roots of this tree are much less likely to be underneath the road than they are in the front yard. So with being a little bit crass, let's kill this tree with disturbance and then see how we can unkill it after that. So where are these tree roots? Let's just focus on this tree alone. So we have these absorption roots or critical roots over here. Now we have the structural roots closer to the tree. So what's being proposed with this project? So we have a new home. We have a path that goes to the front. And then what often is the big killer is utilities. So we have all these utilities coming through here. Might be water, gas, sewer. This might be whatever. Electric. A lot of new buildings put their electric underground. And then we have dry wells that are connected to our stormwater facilities. And these are all things that every new home usually gets as part of a connection. Sometimes these go to the back of the house, but that's not that common. It does happen in Arlington County, but in that case, often you'll have an electric connection going to the back, but you'll still have some other connections going in the front. So that's a lot of cutting of that root zone. So what does that mean when you go over this? So you have this dry well really close to the tree. You have this utility line. You have another utility line here, another utility line, another dry well, another utility line, as well as this path, and then the building, of course, which often requires some space to install the building, and a new driveway. So that's about this much impact. So if you look at the dashed red line over here, so you can see all this impact on this single tree. This tree is receiving less impact on the left, so we're going to focus mostly on this one and seeing how and whether we can even save this. Okay, so then we project, again, using the more attractive way of looking at roots, we can look at what the impact of those roots is. And we see that about 75% of this root system is impacted with this diagram. So that's very likely to be way too much to save this tree. So let's try to unkill this tree from construction. So let's try to move this dry well and then move this gas line, which might be the worst impact in this space. So let's try that. Let's move this gas dry well here, move the gas line here. This may not be even legal, but let's just let's try it. Some utilities have very clear requirements, like you can't have gas and utilities or gas and electric right next to each other, because that could cause a pretty significant explosion if there's a failure in those lines. All right, so now we've moved these things and we still have 50% of the root zone impact. That's still probably too much for this mature sycamore over here. Over here on the left, the sycamore on the left, that's 85% of the root system left intact. That one we can probably assume that it's going to survive construction and can probably be maybe provide some aftercare, some clean cutting of the roots. So could we do more? We could provide what are called root padding, or we could protect the roots during construction. We could do root aeration under a walkway. We can do air excavation. I'll provide examples of all these. And then what's important is that if you do air excavation looking for the roots, you want to have the opportunity to change the design from what you find. And then provide aftercare like watering, mulching, integrated pest management, and making sure to avoid further damage. So root padding could be something like this. This is actually a school project in Arlington County where we put a thick layer of mulch, some chain link down just for this access for this construction project. And these trees on the side of this project are actually still alive and doing well. You could protect roots during utility installation too. You could air excavate, and then you may still have to prune some roots to get through, which is still damage. But you could save some of these large woody roots from excavation, protect them during the work, and then provide a utility underneath. You could provide root aeration matting. This is a mat that allows roots to still have access to oxygen underneath the pavement. So roots need oxygen as well as they do need water, and the tree needs CO2, but we need oxygen to process sugar. So if you remember your biology, the sugars in your body are transferred into energy using oxygen. It's basically burning the sugar. So these roots still need that space. What you can do is provide a mat that protects these roots and provides that aeration, and then build the path on top of it. You could put root aeration matting under the driveway as well. If that's not a pervious driveway, maybe you can do that. Same thing, kind of this is a thicker design, but it has a root aeration matting and then the roadway above that. You could do root exploration with air excavation tools. This is really close to the tree, but it's a good example of where you can find roots. Sometimes you actually find you have no roots in certain areas, and that may allow you to do more damage in that space or more impact in that space without causing significant impact to the tree. This method is impactful to the tree because it can help it can cause damage to those fine roots, but it can help you find the major roots. So you have to think about this, whether this is worth it first. So it is going to cause damage. So it's a little bit of it's kind of like an invasive surgery almost. Like it might help save you, but you do have to think about what the impacts could be. So does this help? Well, we can maybe reduce the impact from the driveway. We could maybe reduce the impact from the path, and then reduce the impact from some of these utilities. We still have this impact from this dry well over here, but it might be only 10% of the roots. And then you look at the bill for how much that work cost, and then you have to start thinking about, will this be worth it to save this large sycamore? And that's really almost more of a value decision. And if this is a public tree, we will try to protect it as much as possible. But there are limits to what we can ask people to do. So some real examples of where people have implemented this. So this is a private development project. So you can see trees on their sites. They have a large red maple on this site, and then trees off the site. Here's a big tree off site. Here's a big tree off site. You can see how these structural root zones are protected. Even the off-site structural root zones of these smaller trees are protected, these spaces, from this development. And the large red maple, which is counted for canopy in the back, is fully protected from impact, so it can be saved. You can see on the inventory too how much critical root zone impact there has been, and you can see some of the smaller trees can take some more impact, and some of the larger trees have taken less impact. These are off-site trees, so number 18 over here is this large pin oak. So we'll make people send an email, or not an email, send a letter to that neighbor to show them, talk to them about their impact, and then these neighbors have to have a conversation about that. Here's another example where the project wasn't able to protect the trees properly. So these, well, they were not able to protect the trees in that they could count them. So they had to remove all the trees because of impact, and they had to replant at the end instead of using protected trees, except for this little guy in the back. I'm going to skip through this. This is, well, I'll show you a little bit of what this means. So people might have questions about what is a dry well? And this is something that is required as part of stormwater management, which is something that's been in place for a while for our single family homes. So you often see these planter boxes on new homes, and they can handle a certain amount of water, but at a certain point will overflow into this pipe, and that goes into this dry well. This is kind of an area with just stone and a pipe through it that can handle water and slowly disperse it into the environment. So Tree Stewards actually did a study on tree survival. And when we looked at survival of trees, we saw about 26% of trees that were supposed to be conserved on plans were no longer present 5 to 6 years after construction. And while some of these trees might have been removed for other reasons, we think that tree decline from root impact is likely one major reason. That's not necessarily easily supported by this data, but it's also not supported. We just believe that construction impact can cause serious impact. So it's often people don't notice trees until they start dying, and I have a hard time believing people were just removing trees for no reason. So we're continuing to understand tree conservation. So these regulations may change over time and get sharper and more specific. We've actually gotten most specific recently with that 10, 20, 30% delineation, and we're looking at how that will impact our development types. So I will leave it at that and then stop sharing. I get the feeling that everybody here knows how to reach me, but I'll post this recording as well, and I'm happy to open it up to questions now.
Vincent, this is Steve Geiger. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Hey, nice presentation. Thank you. One question, during new construction, when you, I know the plans you make where there are trees to be conserved and trees to be planted, the trees to be conserved, you actually go out and measure the critical root zone and, and make that determination. That's how you decide whether the tree can be taken out of the property or can remain.
So it's a little bit different than that. We receive a plan from the developer, which is developed by their arborist, and we review their assessment. So we actually look at what they're proposing as the impact to the critical root zone, and they have to delineate that and actually show it on the plan. And then we review their report and approve it or deny it, depending on whether we agree with their assessment or not. But we visit every site and
Okay.
confirm or deny whether it's accurate.
Let me just ask you, do you find, would you consider it to be a preponderance that are inaccurate or not? Or are the contractors generally following the regulations or?
Um, well, the permit submissions, we almost always go through a couple of cycles. So almost every permit is has some issues with it initially. So we then review it before they can start construction and get them to fix their permit documents before they start it. We do occasionally have violations of a permit, so they have an approved permit and they go outside of their approved limits. And then we document that and have them either find them or have them fix the issue if it's minor. But I'd say this is just pulling out of thin air. I'd say that's about 5% maybe maximum of the projects that don't understand or violate their tree protection in some way.
Okay, thank you.
Nora?
Yeah, the I've got two questions actually. I hear from a lot of people that send us emails and say, why wasn't this tree saved or something? And quite often it's a neighbor who they talk to the contractor and the contractor says, well, the county made me take it down. And my response has always been, well, the county can't tell them they have to take something down. They can tell them they won't get credit for it. And the contractor decides to take it down. But the county can't go onto the property and say, you have to save this and you have to move that, as I understand it. What you can do is say you have to have this much canopy coverage in 20 years and plant, correct?
Yes, but so I'll start with the first part. I'll start with the first part of your question. We cannot make people remove trees unless they are a high risk to public property. So if they're about to fall over onto the road, for example, that's correct. And it is a little bit of a distraction technique for developers to say the county is making them remove something. You are correct in that we don't make people remove trees, with that one exception. We only count certain trees, and therefore, by exception, the other trees are not countable. And they could keep every tree on the property if they do. But that doesn't mean they're going to survive. Now, on the other side of things, we do review every project for what's called we are requiring projects to stay within their construction footprint, and a construction footprint is defined in the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance as the building and just anything you need to construct that building. And if they go outside of that, then we push back on that. So they have to maximize the conservation of trees outside of the construction footprint to the maximum extent practicable. And that's a legal term. And that's a little bit more of a negotiation. So if there's a tree outside of the construction footprint, then we can require them to try to conserve that tree.
Okay, and
Right.
one more thing I wanted to clarify, because we get a lot of emails about this on the listserv, is that a neighbor will say, the construction is impacting my tree on my property, and we refer them to your website where you've got that nicely laid out about everything you just mentioned, and tell them to contact the contractor. And they do
Yeah.
that. And the contractor still
Yeah.
says, well, I'm going to build it this way. Right. But beyond that, the county can't really get involved. If they want to go ahead and contact the master arborist and send a letter from a lawyer, they can do all of that. But you can't tell the developer that they can't construct. Is that correct?
Yeah, so that's a limitation of being working in Virginia. We have very strong private property rights.
Right.
This is the website that Nora is referencing. For those who don't know, we have a website where we explain what you can do as a neighbor with impacted trees. And sometimes you can either through the FOIA process get a plan of the neighbor's project, but they also should be sending a copy of the plan to every neighbor with impacted trees. Now, yeah, it is very complicated, and sometimes even turns into legal battles between neighbors. But you are right. We are generally not getting involved in neighbor to neighbor conflicts. That's usually a civil issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Emily?
Hi, Vincent. Thank you very much for your talk today. I was curious, you had some of your diagrams that showed the lots and the trees on the next door neighbors' properties. How hard is it for you to get access to go onto those properties to get that tree data? And I guess you're saying that the contractor initially does that. And how often are those trees missing when you first go out to do your tree site visits and review those plans?
Okay, let's look at one of the examples I had open. So this is what a contractor submits. We are legally allowed to go on the property being developed, so we can check every tree that's on that property. But then, yes, we have to, and technically the contractor is only legally allowed to go on that property unless they happen to own the neighboring properties. But yes, these trees offsite are often have to be added, so the size is not always perfectly accurate. Unless it's the tree that's right on the property line where you can just measure it right there. You may have to estimate the size of a tree like this on the left and get a less than perfect measurement. And then you have a second question. How often are they inaccurate? Every while. I mean, the arborists that work for these contractors have an incentive to get things on the plan correctly, because that means their permit will get approved. But every once in a while, a tree gets missed on a neighboring property. Alrighty. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, I got another Nora. Go ahead, Nora. Oh, you're muted if you want.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. So any suggestions for tree stewards about what we could do to help out with construction projects and stuff, either assisting urban forestry or education beyond what's on the county websites?
Yeah, it's challenging. Yeah, I really appreciate all the work that the tree stewards do and answering those kind of questions and sending people to the county website. But these projects are often somewhat charged with the neighbors, so I would also caution you to be careful with getting too involved, because unless you are yourself an ISA certified arborist, you yourself in hot water if you're giving too much advice. So I would continue to refer to people, try to get people to get an ISA certified arborist that's familiar with construction. And that's really a critical thing. There's a lot of certified arborists there that are just working for tree care companies. And that's important that they're providing their expertise for that, but they may not have the expertise about construction and impact. So if you make any recommendations, send people to. I think what's helpful is to go to the American Society for Consulting Arborists. Those folks are often familiar with construction impact. And let me see if I can pull this.
Yeah, they're on our list to refer to.
Yeah. So give me a second. So this is a group of people that are independent arborists. They can be a little bit more expensive, but they tend to know a little bit more about construction impact and tree health. But people can find a consulting arborist by clicking on this link and then looking at the area and where they live, and then going from there. Because I think the tree stewards provide an amazing service to the county, but I wouldn't want you all to get into some kind of legal hot water with getting in between two neighbors. And that we have, I have handed a bunch of brochures about avoiding damage from construction to trees. I think, Nora, that's also in the tree stewards pile. Feel free to use those. That's developed by, that's developed by ISA. There's also an online version of that, I think. Let me see.
Yeah, there is. It's under goodtrees.org, which is a fantastic name.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can pull that up since we have a little bit of time, and that can be a good reference to. Yeah, here we go. This is a great website to send people, and then you can help people without being the subject matter expert explicitly. So this goes through all these brochures can help with this. I think, let's see, avoiding tree damage during construction is on here. And you can show this and show this to people. So it shows examples of how to do it poorly, and then some other advice on this as well. And then I'll show one more thing. If people really want to get into the weeds of things, let's see if we can pull this up. If a neighbor wants to get regulatory information, what's important is that these projects are required to get a land disturbing activity permit, and this website has a guidance manual associated with it, and this guidance manual has a section called landscape conservation. And that's where all our regulations are laid out. I'll scroll down to it so you can at least see what that section looks like. It's kind of a wordy PDF. This is mostly when people don't know where to look for regulations. So the landscape conservation plan requirements is where all our tree conservation requirements are. And if you ever need a link to that, just send me an email. This takes me 3 seconds to send you if you can't find it. So yeah, those are some resources that you all could help with. But yeah, any other thoughts or questions?
Vincent, this is Joanne, and I came on late because another meeting that should have been over sooner wasn't. But thank you for this time. I look forward to catching the recording.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to get this record. I'm gonna stop recording if you all are done, and then I will try to get this